Short Stack, Little Jimmy, and His Little Majesty. If I were to say these three nicknames to you, you'd probably think this speech would be about comedian and actor Danny DeVito. But this speech is actually about our fourth president and our shortest president, standing at only 5'4", James Madison. To have context for just how much he did, you have to understand the time at which he lived. When he performed most of his tasks, the United States was going up against Britain, which was the world's largest military. Until he started his expanding his ideas, revolution wasn't an idea. Actually, the people didn't get behind the idea of revolution until 8 months before the Declaration of Independence was written, which coincides with many of Madison's works. Thomas Jefferson has a great quote which states, "How little do my countrymen know what precious blessings they are in possession of, and what no other people on earth enjoy." James Madison understood this and tried to help as many people as he could through his works. In the lens of history, James Madison is seen as a secondary founding father, who got played off of his friend Thomas Jefferson's success and the success of his home state, Virginia, as a whole. Through my speech, I hope to dispute these stereotypes with the information of just how crucial Madison was to the expansion of our new country. To do this, we will examine Madison's life before, during, and after his presidency. Now that we have reviewed, in short, the situation which Madison was born into, we'll take a closer look specifically into his life. Madison's early life set him up for a life of future prosperity. He was born in Virginia to two farmers. However, due to his poor health, he could not take over the family farm. This forced him to pursue higher education. Soon after he was born, the United States plunged into the Revolutionary War. During the war, he wrote Virginia's Constitution by himself and was a major proponent for French aid during the Revolution, which was key to us winning the Revolutionary War. After the war, he wrote the Federalist Papers with John Jay and Alexander Hamilton. What's important here is that John Jay and Hamilton were the leaders of the party which Madison opposed, the Federalists. The Democratic Republicans and the Federalists engaged in a very nasty dispute through much of our nation's early history. Most famously, he wrote the Bill of Rights, which outlined the basic rights for a citizen living in the United States. This was actually one of the most controversial things he did, as the Federalists argued that once you write down the rights that someone has, then that's all the rights you have. However, after convincing George Washington and Thomas Jefferson, he was able to get these down, and now they are one of the major cornerstones to our democracy today. The circumstances which Madison inherited as president undermined any real changes he could bring about. According to the University of Virginia's Center for Madisonian Studies, in 1808, Madison defeated James Pinckney easily, despite heavy opposition from Federalist media. He defeated Pinckney 144 to 44 electoral votes. As you can see, he not only got his home state of Virginia, which composed almost 50% of total electoral votes, but the major Federalist strongholds of Pennsylvania and New York. 2 years later, the U.S., led by Andrew Jackson, annexed West Florida from the Empire of Spain. Madison gave Jackson direct orders to stop at Pensacola, which is here. Madison, however, completely disregarded him and ended up conquering not only West Florida, but all the way down to Tampa Bay. What's important about this is to do this, they had to fight not only Spanish forces, but French forces who had earlier aided us. The most famous event of his presidency was the War of 1812. In 1812, after English trade restrictions and the capturing of American sailors, the United States declared war on Britain. In this war, Washington, D.C. was eventually burned to the ground, and that's what a lot of people remember from this war. However, Americans staved off British attacks on New York, Baltimore, and New Orleans, which allowed them to win what one soldier called a second war for independence. Madison spent the last 4 years of his presidency rebuilding what had been destroyed in the war, and eventually ordered a complete reconstruction of Washington, D.C. And this composed many of the streets and monuments that we have in D.C. today. Actually, the Washington Monument was constructed, began construction during his presidency. After his 8 years of service, Madison stepped down and retired to his family plantation at Montpelier. He continued to have close relations with his best friend, Thomas Jefferson, and together they founded the University of Virginia, which still stands today. Together, they supported higher education throughout all of the states, and he died eating his breakfast on June 28, 1836. This was actually a major disappointment to many of the American citizens, because if he were to last only 6 more days, he would be the third of our first 4 presidents to die on the 4th of July. Madison's most famous quote, "If men were angels, then no government would be necessary." Madison saw people for what they were and met them in order to better them and our country as a whole. Madison's ability to work for the good of everyone and his compromising spirit helped set the foundation for this country. It is important to see his legacy as an example for bipartisanship, or for anti-partisanship, and to correct the attitudes of strong polarization we see today. As you can tell by before his presidency, during his presidency, and after his presidency, this very, very short man casts a very, very large shadow. Thank you.